And we're live. Welcome back to another Tactical Podcast with Gutter Fighting Secrets. This is going to be Tactical Podcast number 19. Today, we're coming at you with Mike Klein. Now, Mike is an instructor with the One Shepherd Warriorship Leadership Program. For those of you who haven't seen my previous videos about the One Shepherd Leadership Institute, highly recommend that you check it out. This is the most realistic combat training that you can possibly get. I mean, this is it. Basically, One Shepherd takes young men and women, or even older guys and girls, and forms them into leaders and warriors. I will leave links below for One Shepherd, but this is actually going beyond simply One Shepherd here. This is going to be something really special because Mike actually, the first semester I was there, was the hand-to-hand combatives instructor at One Shepherd, as well as being a cadre amongst just the other staff and cadre there. Now, Mike started in martial arts when he was a young guy. I'm talking Taekwondo, in the McDojo, in the strip mall when he was. How old were you, Mike, when you started to get a?
Oh man, I don't even remember. Maybe like 7.
Yeah,
I'd say.
Sounds about right. That's when most of us started that. And Mike was saying that he quickly kind of got disillusioned with the whole Taekwondo thing when his brother started wrestling. Mike quickly kind of learned to have a real love and fascination with grappling, went on to grapple and wrestle all through middle school, high school, even college. In between high school and college, Mike was doing something we were just talking about called SCA, Heavy Armor Combat. And in addition to your football career and everything like that, Mike, I'm going to let you kind of take it away here because I really want to get into this. Can you tell us a little bit more about the heavy armor combat stuff?
Yeah, man. So SCA Heavy Armor Combat, I got into it when I was real young. I think every area has their own kind of requirements of how old you got to be to start participating. In my area, it was 16 years old at the time, and I was like 15 and a half, something like that. So I had a little bit of waiting period. But that was actually really good for me because I was able to meet all the guys, and they actually got me started with training on the Pell. And I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Pell, but it's basically just like the heavy bag, but for swords, right? So I was able to practice all of my forms, all my strikes, and things like that before I actually started having to, wield the rattan sticks against dudes and start getting all bruised up. But it's very fun. It's very exhilarating. It's I like to say it's much like paintball with sticks. So you're gonna get banged up and bruised up, but that's actually part of the excitement and that's part of the fun. And you get to practice those Western martial arts skills, whether that's sword and shield or hand and half sword, great sword, pole arms, spears, and they even have combat archery contingents. And you do one-on-one engagements, you do 2-on-2s, 4-on-4s. You got little smaller battles throughout the year, and then it generally culminates in 1 or 2 mega clashes where they call them wars, and it really is a war. I mean, it's talking like 100 on 100 guy engagements out there in the field with objectives, and it's really amazing to have that opportunity to get out there and banging out with some dudes.
Now, are you guys using like armor or what kind of?
Absolutely. There's minimum armor requirements for safety. You got to have a helmet, hand protection, wrist protection, kidney protection, and your knees and your elbows and neck protection requirements. Now, don't quote me. It's been a long time since I participated in this stuff. I mean, this is something I was doing in high school and like my first couple years in college. So it's been a while since I got out there. I got into other stuff like One Shepherd and shooting and things of that nature as I went on. But it was a really great time for me. And honestly, it's still something that I think would be fun, to go and throw the armor on and get back out there.
Oh yeah, it sounds like a blast. Go and beat the shit out of some guys with some sticks, man.
Oh yeah.
So, you mentioned One Shepherd, and we were talking a little bit before. How did you get involved with One Shepherd? Tell us a little bit about, your journey from your basic warrior course until becoming a full-fledged black hat instructor there.
Yeah, so just backing up a little bit, how I found out about One Shepherd was I was going through the Appleseed program at the time. I was a instructor in training, and well, if you guys don't know about Appleseed, it's one of the I think the best basic rifle marksmanship programs out there. They're teaching people to the old, U.S. Army World War II standards, trying to get people to shoot out to 4 minutes of angle, which means you can shoot a 1-inch group at 25 yards, a 4-inch group at 100, and then you're shooting a 20-inch group man size silhouette targets at out to 500 meters. So it gives you some great some great tools out there in the light infantry realm that you may not be able to employ all the time, but if you have that combat overmatch capability, it's definitely something that that you can utilize to devastating effect. But going back to how I got into One Shepherd, there was actually a couple guys that were talking to me about it at the time. One of the guys was I knew from Appleseed. He, mentioned it to me in passing, and then there was another guy that I knew locally that I had been doing some light infantry training with, just on the side. We both had a passion for that. I did airsoft and things like that also as a kid, and went through the ROTC program. Not necessarily at the time if I knew I was going to go in through the Army or not, but it definitely was, a warrior skill set that I wanted to acquire. And he's like, man, if you're interested in this stuff, you need to check out One Shepherd. And that's kind of what led me to that path.
And you started your One Shepherd career in 2015 with the Basic Warrior course. For guys who don't know, that's basically just a week of kind of drinking out of a fire hose when it comes to learning everything about the basics of the basics, whether that's how to conduct a, fire team rush and work your radios, basically find out how to operate your night vision, things like that, bounding and all of that. So you went through that in 15, and then when did you graduate Light Fighter, which is the last piece of the puzzle that you got to get put together to get tabbed in?
Yeah, I just graduated Light Fighter. Man, I want to say spring of 2019.
Okay.
Somewhere around there. Yeah.
And how do you feel now that you're like full all the way through it? Like how do you feel teaching now? It's got to be a good feeling.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I have I think a very well-rounded set of competencies. I mean, granted, it's not the end-all be-all, but I have a good basis of experiences that I can build my learning off of. It's one thing to read something in a manual. It's another thing to get out there and do it and see it and feel what it's like, because words on paper just don't cut it if you have no context to reference them to.
Yeah. And that's one thing that I really felt about One Shepherd. I cannot speak more highly about them, and obviously I'm not paid by these guys at all to talk, politely about them. I really can't recommend this enough for anybody out there interested in acquiring these types of skill sets as well as leadership training. I mean, when I went there for my first semester, I thought you guys had all served, 8, 9, 10, 15 years in the military. I didn't know some of you guys actually weren't professional soldiers. That's how good they train you there. That's how well they train you. I mean, you guys were talking and teaching us about the craziest, wildest things that most, I think a lot of even infantry guys that do their 4 years in the Army, they wouldn't necessarily go so in-depth with this stuff. I could be wrong, but that was my impression. And, you guys are very, very talented and very good at what you do. So I know that you say, it's not all of the puzzle, which I realize, But at the same time, I mean, you guys are very, very well trained as instructors to teach us what we need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my experience as well. There's no better teacher than experience. And One Shepherd also is really big on becoming that lifelong student. And I think that's what separates a guy that has some level of expertise and a real master is the guy that's constantly honing his craft and constantly improving and never thinking he has all the answers. He's always searching for the truth and trying to better himself.
So that's one thing that every time I interview a professional warrior, I hear over and over again is that leadership and learning about combatives and everything that has to go into that, full spectrum of warriorship is you never stop learning. Every competent professional warrior I've ever interviewed has said the same thing: is that you can never ever stop learning, and that's really what separates the men from the boys in this area of discussion. And how important do you think it is for guys out there? Maybe they've been out of the military for some time, or even not been in, but they've had a little bit of training to really just continue to hone their skills.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's complacency is death.
Yeah.
Is the best way I can put it. I mean, in all aspects, be that financial, be that martial, be that physically, your health wise. If you think you're done, you're gonna start degrading from there on out. So not only is it a sad thing that you're actually wasting all these years, to get better and better and better. But you're also, you're getting worse. You're not as good as you once were, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So the only way that you can compensate for that is by, staying up with the times and staying current and staying relevant.
And now you mentioned staying relevant, which I think is good because it segues here into the whole modern combatives program. As far as when I was there, you were doing teaching us as far as the hand-to-hand stuff goes, highly jiu-jitsu based program. Which look, you got to stay current and relevant with the times because other guys out there, and I always say this, are studying BJJ, MMA. If you think your opponent on the battlefield or in the street more likely is not going to be trained, then you're kidding yourself. You are big on BJJ. Now, you've been doing wrestling, obviously, for years and years and years. How long have you been doing jiu-jitsu for?
So, so when I actually got started in jiu-jitsu, it wasn't just straight up jiu-jitsu. It was MMA, right? So it was originally a club at my college, and when I stumbled upon it, right outside the weight room, there was a little mat room, and I was walking by to get a drink of water, and I saw a bunch of dudes rolling. I'm like, oh, that looks like grappling, but that's not the grappling I'm used to. And that kind of started my journey. I walked in there and started talking to the guy, and I actually slapped hands with the instructor. And at that time, I was 195 pounds, just stacked, and this dude was like 135 pounds. And we weren't. I realized very quickly we weren't playing the same game. And that hooked me. That hooked me right out the bat. But I'll say this: the very next day, I walked in, and he had a big Santa sack slung over his shoulder, and it was full of gloves. And he was like, "Okay, glove up, boys. We're gonna spar." And I'll tell you this: that was a pretty rough break-in. Not having any, striking or especially defense. I mean, every guy, growing up thinks he can throw a punch,
right.
But there's a difference between winging something and actually being able to, parry, slip, block, and then throw strikes right down the middle. So a very rude awakening all the way around on that one.
Now, you have been boxing, I mean, for a while now, but before that, you had no boxing, no striking, just wrestling.
Well, the Taekwondo,
Sure,
if you want to
sure.
count it as striking. But yeah, for the most part, wrestling was my strength that I wanted to play to. Yeah.
Now, we always hear the the classic analogy is that a boxing can beat wrestling and wrestling can beat boxing, something to that degree. Was that your experience when you went in there and threw the gloves on? Is that these guys who were trained with striking were able to kind of get the better of your wrestling abilities?
So here's the thing, and I realized this early on. As a wrestler, unless a guy's a super super high level striker, which most people aren't, it's pretty easy to just say, "Oh, I'm just going to suck a hard hit,
Yeah,
and I'm just going to drive through,
yeah.
and I'm going to take the guy down, and then he's going to be in my world."
Exactly, and I think that wrestling, honestly, and I mind you, I've never wrestled. I mean, outside of MMA, I've never had any wrestling experience, and I think personally that it's the most effective art that you can study as far as a one-on-one, man-on-man combat.
Mm-hmm.
The only
Mm-hmm.
way to neutralize a wrestler is to know jujitsu, and unfortunately,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people that wrestled in high school, like yourself, and even through college, that are just so. I mean, it's not only simply the you know the physical training of it as far as the techniques go, it's also the conditioning. It's the just the pure brute force on force, like you and I always talk about. Is
Mm-hmm.
it makes somebody a lethal freaking weapon, man? And
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah,
always
I
I
mean
always can't.
you're
Yeah,
tough physically and mentally. I mean you're tough. I mean the skill set is great, but you got that character built up. You got the capacity for combat.
they beat the shit out of you in wrestling training, don't they?
It's not easy. As my wrestling coach used to tell us, we were the Green Berets of our athletic program. And, after, seeing some of I'm not, going to toot my own horn or whatever, but, I've saw some of the interviews of these guys that, went through SEALs training and what have you. And those guys, they pretty well said, hey, if you are graduating from a high school wrestling program and you go through that, you're probably going to pass because it's not about just the physical conditioning, but also the mental conditioning, the willingness to fight through the suffering and complete the objective.
That's a really important thing that you bring up there is the psychology of a warrior and what will make and break him. And if I think if you decide that you're going to make it through and complete your objective, I mean, obviously, if we're talking combative situation, you could get killed. But if you really like something like training buds or whatever, I firmly believe that it's really the mind that makes that success or failure.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just talking to one of my buddies that he's pretty slight of stature, but he done all the Army airborne stuff, and he pretty well said, hey, they'd drop us off, and we'd have to hump all our gear back, and it very much came down to it didn't matter at that point how big you were, everyone was going to physically reach their breaking point, and then it always became a mental game, regardless of where your starting point was.
That's such a
And
key thing, man.
yeah,
Yeah. And, whether it's wrestling, whether it's jujitsu, whether it's even going through something like One Shepherd, where, you're out in the field for 3 days and really out of your comfort zone as far as most of us in our modern comfortable lives are concerned, it really gives you the extra edge when it comes to your daily life. If you can survive through that shit, man, you can survive through pretty much any little crisis that'll happen along the way of your comfy civilian life.
mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
definitely a great experience for sure.
Now, you went from wrestling into jiu-jitsu. You're currently, how many stripes do you have on your blue belt right now?
I don't really have any stripes at all on my blue belt. I pretty well got my blue belt, and my son was born, and
Okay.
I've been just trying to reorganize my life still around that event. So
I wouldn't feel too bad about that, man. I was talking with Stephen Keston the other day, and he said the same thing: is that when his kid was born, he took a long hiatus from jiu-jitsu. You have to, man. I mean, you just have to.
For sure. A life change. Now, I know these animals that their kids born and they're right back in the gym. I don't know. For me, that that wasn't the case for me. I do love jiu-jitsu. I love grappling. I love all this martial stuff too. But it is a priority for me. But I also have other duties and responsibilities I have to attend to.
And that's what makes you a man, I mean, you realize what your top priorities are, and you attend to them, and you don't just run off to jiu-jitsu because you want to go roll,
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, the thing is, man, you actually picked a perfect time to take a hiatus because at least here on the East Coast, man, we're all taking a hiatus now. So we're all going to be in the same boat when we go back. Fat and out of shape and out of breath,
Yeah, it's going to be fun, those first few rolls, I'm sure.
I can't wait for it, man. Now, I'm not anticipating this thing to blow over anytime soon, but when it does, I'm going to be one of the first people back on the mat, dude, because I want to see how gassed out everyone else gets.
Dude, for sure. Make sure you bring a barf bag, man. You'll probably need it. If you haven't been, staying healthy and running or doing some cardio, you're going to be in a world of hurt. I know I always am when I step back on the mats after a while.
It's the worst, man. It's the worst. I always feel like the first roll is fine, like I've got plenty of energy, and then like it's just downhill after that for a couple of weeks.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's weird how that is. You feel super strong right there at the beginning, but the recovery time is a while for your body to readjust to what you're asking of it.
So have you been doing anything else? Have you been keeping any cardio up, doing any weights?
Yeah, just weights here and there.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing too serious, just trying to not lose strength. Cardio, nah, man, I hate cardio. My cardio comes from rolling. I know that's a horrible thing to say, but it's the truth. It's the only thing that can really feel like it pushes me because it's fighting for survival. And if I don't have that motivation, it's really hard to do that on my own.
It's funny you say that because after 3.5, nearly 4 years of rolling now, I can't get the same workout. I just can't do it. Like I run, I'll do the bike, I'll do burpees and stuff. I can't get that same type of heart pounding cardio as I do from jiu-jitsu. I think maybe it's got something to do with the adrenaline as well, but I don't know. Once you've rolled, there's really no other like superior workout than that.
Yeah, man. There's nothing like fighting for your life to give you that extra motivation you need.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, so how do you think that guys? I mean, you mentioned about the cardio and the running. Is there kind of an ideal program that if someone were to ask you, I'm taking a 3-month hiatus from jiu-jitsu, but I want to be in decent shape when I go back, what would you tell someone like that?
Man, I don't have the best answer for any of that. All I got to say is, after your 3 months are out, make sure you get back to the mats because it's very easy for 3 months to turn into 3 years.
Yeah. Yeah, we see, constantly, and you bring up before about the blue belt blues and all that, man, and, guys take a hiatus and they never come back. I think for someone like you, though, like you're itching to get back. I can tell from talking to you right now. It's just that you're waiting for the right time and place.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I'll be doing this stuff my whole life, irregardless of if I take off a year or 2 or 3, that's gonna really suck, and my body's gonna have to change, again, go through that growth process and everything. But it's part of my life, and I'll be doing this. I'll be doing this stuff as long as I'm physically able to.
Yeah.
So whether I'm not doing it actively, I definitely am doing it in spirit, and I'm staying mentally spun up on it.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's so important. Just talk about it, watch YouTube videos. As cliche as that sounds, keep your mind in the game so that you are itching to get back in.
Yeah. Well, the other thing is, we're talking about jiu-jitsu a lot, but honestly, in some regards, I'm starting to get a little bit disillusioned with it in that, I think we talked a bit before about how, it's got watered down a little bit over time, and it's in some places a little bit less martial than what it was originally being used for. And in some regards, that's kind of a shame, but there's still a lot of good, even in a sporterized version. Very similar to, what I think about, scholastic wrestling is, there's a lot of good in that, but it's still kind of a shame that it's been watered down from its original pure martial roots.
My instructor, John Helwig, he always used to tell me, used to tell me about other schools out there don't have you go live. They don't have you do positional sparring. You'll see blue belts walk in like, half hour late and like everyone's saying high fives and what's up dudes and like no one's really like taking it that serious. I always thought he was blowing smoke. I thought that he was just saying that to like make us feel tough and good until I went and started traveling around to other gyms, man. And I've seen some of the way these cats do it, dude. Like I wasn't expecting that in any way, shape, or form. But some of these places, man, it's just so bullshit that like you're getting a jiu-jitsu themed workout. You're not actually really rolling.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I've been fortunate enough that I haven't seen that too much. I mean, although I have seen like the McDojo version of jiu-jitsu,
Yeah.
that's another story unto itself. But the point I was kind of getting at more is people training for competition and not really training for street encounters, like going for dropping back for leg locks instead of the old school jiu-jitsu where it's always top pressure, chest on chest, control of the hands, side control. That almost like very similar to scholastic wrestling, like grinding a person down and having complete domination over them.
Yeah, yeah. So you bring up, position, and that's a big thing. Is I always think as far as street fighting, what I got out of jujitsu was position. They always say right, position over submission, but it couldn't be truer. If you can get, a good mount, unless the guy, bridges and rolls or whatever, you've pretty much got that fight, man. Like if you can get someone in good side control, you can light them up with, elbows or whatever. It's it's so key, man. Now, what would you say to guys out there who are looking into this stuff and wanting to learn more, like you say, about how to actually fight with your jiu-jitsu instead of go to competition with it? Concentrate on position more.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the main things you need to be cognizant of when you're rolling is focusing on in-fight weapon access. Where would you have weapons on your body, and how can you acquire those while you're in the fight? And the same thing for the other person too. Craig Douglas has a course called ECQC, and he does a really great job explaining, common places people carry weapons, methods for, tying people up so you can, use one of your arms to tie up both of your opponents, and then you can access your weapon to in the fight. And other things as well. I think you were talking to a guy a little bit ago about, I think there's a common misconception that grappling always has to end up on the ground.
Right.
And that's simply not the case. You can use your grappling skills, again, to tie up, two of his hands with only one of yours and access your tools. You can use that stand-up skills to get behind your opponent so you can, again, access your weapons where it's very difficult for them to utilize them against you. there's a lot of things you can still use grappling, especially when you look at weaponizing your grappling as opposed to just grappling for grappling's sake.
And you mentioned about guys not really kind of understanding the whole jiu-jitsu thing. They think about it, they look at it, and they say, oh, it's just ground fighting. It's always, ends up in guard, and I would just punch him in the nuts or whatever, whatever bullshit excuse. I get it, but at the same point, after having gone through, serious jiu-jitsu programs, now I firmly understand what you're saying as far as, no. You're going to learn about stand-up fighting, positioning yourself to get behind the guy, to trip him, to do whatever. You're going to learn about, how to tie him up, like you say, to access a knife, a firearm, your keys, right? Whatever it is, you're going to learn about how to get position over the guy, how to sweep him if he gets position on you to get back in that dominant position. Very little of it is that, mythological thing about, oh, just put him in the guard and do arm bars on him from the guard, right? Like, yeah, that's the mythology, but that's not really the case. You're learning so much more than just the ground stuff.
Yeah, and absolutely, especially if you keep that open mind so you can stay, keyed up to thinking about, all the ways this thing can go, where, again, like I said, you're not grappling for grappling's sake. You're actually grappling to win a fight or win an engagement. You're thinking about it as a street encounter of all the possibilities. You're thinking, hey, when I mount this guy, I want to be heads up, not just because it creates good posture, but because then I got good situational awareness. I can see if some other people are approaching me while I'm landing bombs on this guy.
Mm-hmm. You bring up a great point with that because, so many jiu-jitsu guys out there are going to competition schools. Not that I have anything against that at all. It's a great, way to improve your martial skill sets, but when you're not constantly getting reinforcement about looking for other attackers and things like that, it does put you off your game a little bit. Can you give us any advice on how we can stay sharp as far as, keep thinking about the street aspect of it while we roll, even if it is at like one of those competition schools, for example?
So, it's just kind of keeping that in the back of the mind and maybe even change your focus on your training, worrying more about where your opponent's hands are, worrying about where, if you were to get yourself tied up in a very compromised position, how could you access your weapons if you need to right now? Another good thing is to watch a lot of tape. Like a lot of, professional ball players and basketball or football players or whatever, they'll actually watch stuff on, how other teams perform and how they themselves perform. But where I'm getting at is, with all the security cam footage and things like that, you can actually see, you got a wealth of knowledge out there of seeing how violent encounters go down, and burn those pictures in your head, so you know how these things shape up and you know how these things end.
Yeah, I like that. And it's more than just watching the footage that serves 100% valid purpose, but it's also visualization, I think, right? Like when you go and watch the old karate guys doing their katas in the air. Well, they're visualizing an opponent in front of them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, we can't really do that, solo training so much in BJJ. It only takes us so far. But at the same point, I think that visualization is really important.
Oh, absolutely. I think the old adage of you can't do anything unless you have thought about it first.
Right.
I think that still holds true today. It's almost impossible to perform a function without having the idea pop in your head.
Yeah, absolutely. If you haven't been there, then you haven't been there, right?
Yeah, and even if even if it's just something you've seen, because, you could reference something you saw on television, from a movie, from interactions you had with your coworkers, from experiences you had in high school, or the tough guy on the playground, or whatever, or from that security camera footage or stories that other guys have relayed to you.
Now, let's take this in a little bit towards the actual, combat side of things as far as One Shepherd and even beyond that goes. Um, this is, again, something that I always say with guys who are doing a lot of range shooting and not really training with the tactics, right? Or even if you are doing a little bit about pieing around corners and everything, which very valid training. But when you go out with One Shepherd, man, like you're living it. Yeah, you're not getting actually shot. You're not seeing your buddies get shot. You don't got to put tourniquets on them or anything like that. But you are getting everything else. And I can't tell you, I've been through a number of SUT courses outside of One Shepherd, but for some reason, living that, 72-hour combat engagement, standing 2 in the morning, all of that stuff, man, it provided me with more of a glimpse into what it's really like than anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd like to use the analogy from boxing, right? So boxing, you work on the heavy bag to perfect your punch, right? That's very similar to what you would do either through dry fire practice or at a square range, right? You work on that draw stroke, you work on your accuracy, you work on that good trigger press and reset, sight picture, sight alignment, all the good stuff, right? Same thing with boxing when you're working the heavy bag. Then you progress to working with your coach, where you're working focus mitts, you're working combinations, you're working on reacting to what your coach is providing for you. Similar to when you're working with a coach on the range, maybe you got a professional instructor out there that's telling you to draw and fire a series of shots, or shift your fire to another target, or something kind of dynamic in that regards. But then at the end of the day, you have to put the gloves on and the mouthpiece in and spar. Because sparring is when that gives you the complete picture and the complete context. And not only that, it drives your training. It drives drives home the point of what you need to be working on to better yourself as a boxer. And One Shepherd is that, and I say One Shepherd, but there's other good force on force schools out there. But, the experience I've had there really helped drive the point for me of what skills I need to be focusing on when I'm, using a rifle or handgun.
Yeah, you mentioned a great point there as far as the force on force, because that really is what makes it an efficient program. Is you got other trained individuals shooting back at you. You're utilizing the mild system, which for the guys out there who don't know, that's basically like a harness you put on, and it's kind of an attachment, like a laser that you put onto the end of your M4 platform. And, it's good. What is it? How far is that good up to, Mike?
So it depends on the actual weapon system. I think the majority of the ones for small arms is good for about 500 to 600 meters.
Yeah, okay.
And I've actually have seen it used out there where you were able to get those shots out to 450 plus yards and actually get confirmed kills, which is really satisfying to know that your marksmanship fundamentals can be used and can be effective out there at distance in real world environments.
Yeah, and it's different when the guy's shooting back at you and you're kind of having to worry about that, as well as moving around a little bit. It's a lot different than going and shooting paper.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that it kind of drives the point home. Talking about shooting paper, that's one of them. Is all these paper targets you see of the target squared up with you, and you're firing round after round at a target that may have a weapon raised at you, or at least is squared up with you, and then going out in the field where you can be engaged and you could be taken out. Like for me, my mentality completely shifted to where I don't want to be my muzzle pointing at another dude's muzzle. I want to be hitting his flank, so he's looking some other direction, and I'm lighting him up, and he's like doesn't even know where that's coming from. So so I'm safe and I can engage him instead of I pop my head up and he sees me, and it's a race to see who pumps holes into who first.
Yeah, and it's that type of, sneaky guerrilla warfare type tactics that really wins fights, ambushes, even counter ambushes you could put in there that's what makes you able to go up against another trained force and come out on top. Not so much your weapons manipulation, while that is important, I think. Really what it is learning how to conduct those maneuvers.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, having a squared away weapon manipulation, that is fantastic. But for me, the most important step of, let's say, doing a magazine change is letting my buddy know that my gun's down and out of the fight, and he has the job of covering my sector while I get my gun back up into action.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. It's, communication. You always hear that cliche, shoot, move, communicate, but it's like the most important dynamic thing that you could possibly learn how to do.
Yeah, dude. I mean, we are pack animals, and in combat, very much is a team sport. If you're not showing up with a team, you already lost.
Now,
I mean, I think we had this conversation before. Guys like us, and guys in general, they like to think of themselves as lions, right? And man, lions are freaking ferocious monsters that can take on just about anything. But the truth of the matter is, it's very dangerous to be by yourself. It's much better to be able to work as a pack, like wolves or whatnot. But honestly, the ideal is to have a pride of lions, right?
Right, exactly. And I think you were bringing up the analogy of hyenas before, but
yeah,
the thing is if you're not working with a team, like we see the movies. I grew up with Rambo, First Blood, all that stuff where he was going on, and because he's so well trained and he's got such huge muscles, he's able to take on all these dudes. But look, in reality, I mean, he had the tactics, he had the ambushes going for him. He learned that, doing stuff like this, but it's not reality as far as I'm concerned. I've never been in actual combat engagements where guys are shooting live rounds over my head. But at the same point, I know enough to know that if you want to win fights, you do it working with a team.
Yeah.
It's crazy, the disparity between what guys think in their head and then what actually tends to transpire in actual life. There's a big tendency, like for me, I'm guilty of it too, thinking I'm Superman and that I can handle kind of whatever the world throws at me. But when it comes down to it, James Yeager actually has a quote that I like to kind of bring up every now and again, and I'll be having him on the podcast tomorrow. But he always used to say to us in class, look, the classic thing is you're going to rise to the level of your training, right? That's kind of the classic thing you hear. Well, he likes to say you're going to rise to the level of training that you have mastered.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And I think, I think that when we talk about things like hand-to-hand combat, even weapons manipulation, it's all about repetition. It's about repetition, how much you've thought about it, how much you've done it, and really, honestly, not a whole lot else.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Going back to the grappling thing, I think one of the reasons why people say, wrestlers, again, are so tough to beat is because they're not really practicing a million moves. They're getting good at, a handful.
Yeah, that's the classic analogy,
and honestly,
right?
Some of the top-level jiu-jitsu guys are doing basic jiu-jitsu, just at a really, really, really solid, squared-away, sharp, razor-sharp skill set. They're not using, a million moves.
That's something I've noticed too, is that especially when you go to the same, jiu-jitsu club or whatever, you're going to start to pick up on everyone's in there's kind of moves, right? Like, oh, this guy's big on the flower sweep. This guy's going to try to, catch me in that arm bar, from guard or whatever. It tends to actually, do you think that makes you a little bit sloppier? Just kind of being able to anticipate your buddy's moves?
So here's the thing. I mean, at some point it becomes jiu-jitsu on jiu-jitsu, right? And it's like everyone got a counter for a counter of a counter.
Yeah.
And maybe you could say that makes you sloppy or whatnot, but it's just the It's just the reality of what you kind of fall into. But I think if you were to, and this is actually like one of the beauties of competition is you don't know what the other guy's bringing to the table.
Yeah.
And if you got a razor sharp, let's say triangle choke, and the other guy doesn't have a clue that you have that capability, oh man, you could be quite effective.
Yeah.
And the same thing with the street encounters, right? If you don't know your adversary and what he's bringing to the table, and you're able to slap on something really quick and fast and effective, you're ahead of the game.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And, I would say going into competitions is kind of the closest legal way that you get to a street fight, man. Like, you don't know what the fuck the other guy's got up his sleeve, and, you slap hands, and then boom, your adrenaline just surges. It's a cool experience. For the guys out there who maybe are going to schools who don't compete or don't encourage people actively to compete, I would highly recommend it. Now, you grew up doing a lot more competing than I ever have, man, doing wrestling. Is it kind of the same feel?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not going to say over time you get numb to it, but you definitely start to figure out how to manage that a little bit better. I remember just starting out, like, when I would slap hands, like, I would just become freaking exhausted from just that massive adrenaline dump, and I would not have, like, the clock would be ticking on me super fast. It's like either I win in a minute or I'm just done. And it doesn't matter how good my shape was. I would just work myself up like so much to where I would just get drained. And then over time, you start getting a little bit more used to it, and you get able to control that. I mean, it's always going to be there. But, you learn over time how to manage it. So it is very important in getting that competition under your belt.
I've always noticed that when I watch high-level black belt jiu-jitsu guys, on YouTube competing, it's almost like they're so relaxed about it. It's like they're just in on the mat rolling with their buddies. It really
that's
like
actually kind of dangerous, though. I found, I've actually went to the other side of the extreme where I just showed up and I was like, no big deal. Dude, that's not a good place to be in either, because you're not going to be nearly as sharp as you are when you're juiced up.
You need a little bit of that adrenaline.
There definitely is a sweet spot to be coming into it.
Huh. Yeah. I mean, I've got 2 competitions total under my belt, so you're way more, I think, up to speed on these competitions than I am, but it really seems to me, man, that when you do go into these things, if you can kind of find that sweet spot like you were talking about, where you don't get so amped up, but you're also not so chilled, that really is where you need to be operating.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, when it comes to a brand new guy that's never done any hand-to-hand combat, maybe, I don't know, let's just say, for example, he's got a few Krav classes or whatever under his belt, but he really doesn't know much. What would you say to him when he walks in and he says, what martial art should I study if I want to be able to kill somebody?
Well, I think first things first, having a plan is better than nothing. Right? Even if it's crap, at least you're going to be executing, right? So you're not going to be stationary. You're going to be doing something. So you're already ahead of the curve by trying to establish a game plan, whether that's effective, considered effective or considered a joke. It's still at least something. Following that, man, I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of the things we were talking about before was, trying to develop that mental toughness. And there's a few places you can go and you get that. I very much think, boxing gyms could provide that. I think some of the striking gyms, I'm favor the grappling, but I, have done striking before too, and I see the validity of building that warrior mindset in that as well. And I would work on that first. I'd work on building that fortitude and building that mindset. And there, I guess, is a lot of places you can get that. Man, you could probably get that in football too, right?
And we were talking about that, and you said that your football days actually taught you a lot about combatives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're working as a team. Yeah, it's a ball sport, whatever. But it is builds that warrior mindset and that mentality where you're out there and you're hitting dudes with everything you got, and you're trying to take them out before they take you out too. It's almost like a team sumo competition, in some regards. And yeah, for sure. So there's a lot of places where you can build that mindset, and I think that's fundamental to having success in dangerous encounters. Being able to manage, like we said, that adrenaline dump and having that ability to take the fight to the enemy.
How important do you think weapons training is? I'm talking, blades, sticks, things like that.
Man, humans are tool-using creatures. You got to understand the tools humans use.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, man. I mean, it doesn't take any skill for someone to kill someone else with a knife. That's the most feared weapon, personally. Like, if someone pulls a knife on me, man, like, I'm gonna try to run away, personally. Unless I got a gat, I'm not gonna want to fight a guy with a knife, man. It's a fearful weapon.
Tools are dangerous, right? I mean, there's like, there's more than one way to skin the cat, so to speak. But again, going back, the first thing you got to have is your mind right. You don't want to be the guy that freezes under pressure.
Yeah. Yeah, I've seen guys freeze under pressure, and it's not a pretty sight, man. It really is. Not a pretty sight at all. It can lead to drastic consequences. I mean, when I first started with the blades, man, like, I was doing a lot of rubber knife stuff, and I went to battle school with Bill Wolf. He's a combatives guy. He actually teaches gutter fighting. He's out of Canada, and he had us do with live blades, man. And it taught me that, look, you're going to get cut. It doesn't matter what you're doing, man. You're going to get cut. But I firmly believe that one of the better tools that you can have, same thing we were talking about the wrestler, right? One of the best ways to neutralize a wrestler is jiu-jitsu. One of the best ways to be able to have the understanding and fundamentals how to neutralize a knife is grappling. I think, personally. And I don't know. I mean, you've done definitely some blade work, I think, in your past, man, whether it's, rubber knives or whatever.
Yes.
What do you think about jiu-jitsu versus a knife?
Well, so jiu-jitsu is super effective. In some of the stuff that I played with, like, dude, if you got, let's say, a knife plus jiu-jitsu, that's a whole nother beast, because it's like, hey, pay attention to this knife while I gradually slip a triangle choke around your neck. I mean, that is like anything, any skill set you got or any tool you're bringing to the table is now just multiplied in its capabilities, because you're bringing all that stuff into it. As far as defensively use, going against a knife, so the first thing is, if you can, stop the fight before the knife comes out. It's okay sometimes to preemptively go hands-on, right? If you got, the justification by being that subject matter expert and the confidence to call it like you see it and act on what you're seeing. So again, build that library up of what violent encounters look like, so you're not afraid to pull the trigger preemptively before it gets into cutty, bangy.
Yeah.
But after the knife comes out, it's fight or flight, VOA, or maybe you can outrun the guy. I mean, I've never been much of a runner, so it's hard for me to really consider that an option. Unfortunately, I'd rather try to to fight the guy off than try to then just get stabbed in the back, because I'd say most people can outrun me. And like I just admitted, it's not like I really work on my cardio.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, and I always tell guys too, like if you're not incorporating running into your martial training, you probably should be, because
Yeah.
you and I know from just simply one shepherd alone how
Yeah.
much you got to really book it sometimes, man.
Yes, absolutely. It is. It's very much that, fighting with a gun or a rifle, handgun, whatever, really is that, combat athlete of, sprinting from position to position, contouring your body to the train, and, the amount that try to minimize the amount that's visible to your assailant.
Yeah, and that's another thing that's always fascinated me about. I guess you could call it small unit tactics or infantry tactics. Is
Mm-hmm.
just the whole. Where do you position yourself for the optimal cover that you can return fire? How do you manipulate your weapon and change shoulders? All of that type of stuff is so fascinating to me, and it really is a martial art. I don't care what anyone
Mm-hmm.
else says. It's not all this just the jujitsu, the boxing. Yeah, that's martial arts, but so is this stuff too, man. I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely, no doubt. I mean, dude, I'd say it's more of a martial art than even jujitsu, in that it's the modern weapon of the times.
Yeah, exactly. The samurai had their katana and their
Mm-hmm.
freaking the daggers and everything and the arrows. And we have our rifles, our pistols, and our knives, and that's just the sign of the times, man. It's
Yeah,
modern day samurai
dude.
shit,
If
dude.
you're not training the martial arts of 2020, then you need to be.
The ninjutsu, man. They used to say that if you don't adapt with the changing times, that you're going to perish. And I think
Yeah.
nothing could be more fitting for this conversation than that, man. You got to be able to adapt, whether that's, oh, I was a karate guy, now I'm doing jujitsu, which so many of them are. Whether it's,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a martial artist, but I need to learn how to freaking work a rifle as well and take cover. It's just, you've got to be able to adapt.
Yep.
100%,
Absolutely.
man. 100%.
And have that growth mindset.
Yes. I think that's a great point that you bring up there, is the growth mindset. And someone who's not afraid to admit, like, I don't know this or I need to learn more about this, that's the type of individual I'd want on my team.
Yeah. Absolutely, because he's only going to get better over time, right?
Right.
When you build teams, a lot of people think of it just in this moment, but if you can hold on to those guys, keep those connections relevant, develop your assets.
Yeah. And, we were talking last time we spoke on the phone, man, about, developing assets and developing a team as far as, I'm big on prepping, and I don't take it to the tinfoil hat conspiracy world too much, but, practical prepping as far as having a couple weeks of food and water and, some ammunition or whatever, just some basic supplies. But besides for that, having a plan, I think, is the real key.
Mm-hmm.
Developing contacts, man, that you can utilize, whether it's as simple as something like, hey, I've got to evac from the state I'm in because there's coronaviruses fucking everywhere or whatever, there's martial law. I got to go, I got to call Mike. I know he lives out in the Midwest, and like see if I can go hunker down at his place for a week or two where I get my game together or whatever.
Yep.
Developing contacts is so important. But beyond just that, man, we were talking about the lone wolf versus the lion versus the hyena. In other words,
Yeah.
it's difficult, man. Like, to put together a solid team of guys to be able to bug out with, man, it's virtually impossible because most people don't do this shit.
It's tough. It's really tough. I think we were talking about how we got this network of all these great guys, and by and large, they're all like 200 miles, 400 miles, 1,000 miles away from us, and it's like, man, that kind of stinks. I mean, yeah, travel is great, with cars and airplanes and all this nowadays, but sometimes, that just may not be viable, especially if you need them at your house right now, know. Yeah, I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I mean, it's tough. I mean, I guess friends, family, whatever, Just, again, go back to, developing your assets ain't always easy, right? But it's the right answer.
Yes, and that's yes. You mentioned about the fact that we train one shepherd for a week or two out of the year, and we grow in that 1 week into a highly efficient unit, into a highly efficient fighting machine as a team, and then we disband all over the fucking country. So it's like, well, what really good did this really serve me? Because I don't have my buddies and my battle buddies around me. Well, it does you a lot of good. I mean, it teaches you so many lessons, not to mention the fact that, should you need to, you could train up another team of civilians to be able to do that. I've had this.
And the answer is, why ain't you doing that now?
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean,
Exactly.
if anything, we've seen, call it from the pandemic or whatever other examples we've seen, even if you want to look at our legal court cases, whatever, you very much are responsible for your own security, be that physical, be that biological, be that financial, be that whatever. I mean, I hate to say it, guys, but you're on your own. You are your best first and last line of defense.
Yeah.
And anything else, any like buddies or agencies or whatever that may back you up, that's all fine and good. That is awesome. I love any help I can get. But at the end of the day, the buck stops with you.
Yeah.
And whether you like it or not, that's just the way of the world right now.
It really is. It really is. And, that's why I really harp on a lot of this gray man stuff. And that's basically kind of a fancy way of saying, I guess you could call it espionage tradecraft. Not so much. But learning how to operate in a foreign environment on your own when you're the only one there with no backup, that really, I think, is an essential skill set because it teaches you things about what you were saying, developing contacts, learning how to utilize people to your advantage, as well as friends and stuff like that. It's so important to be able to learn how to do that type of stuff in addition to, form up with a team and go kick some ass with a bunch of boots, right?
Yeah, I mean, it also kind of drives to the point of, dude, I want everyone to be my friend. Because if everyone's my friend, then I have no enemies. And if I have no enemies, then I can live in peace.
Yes. And
that's ultimately what we want because peace brings prosperity. Peace is awesome.
Peace is the best, man. I hope that as a nation we're going to be heading towards prosperity again at some track, and I firmly believe we will. But you bring up about a warrior doesn't want war. You and I know firsthand,
absolutely
man.
Not.
It's bad, and it sucks, and the rucksacks are heavy, and it rains out there, and it's cold, and it sucks. So why would we ever want to put ourselves into a position of getting shot at when we could just have peace and prosperity?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we are made to create. I don't think we're made to destroy. I mean, we obviously have the propensity and capacity to destroy, but I think the beauty is in our creations, not in the destruction.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, no other animal in the world on this planet creates music and poetry and, such beautiful things as human beings, man. We are made to be creative, creative beings and express our emotions through, whatever aspect that we are best, suited for, so to speak. And I don't want to get too spiritual, but that's a great point right there, man.
Yeah.
So if you could kind of give guys kind of a parting word here of advice for the newer warriors out there, as well as the heads who have been around for a long time, man, that want to keep going, keep pressing, or even just start learning. Could you give us some, parting words that just say kind of your message to guys in a nutshell? And I realize that's I realize I'm giving you kind of a difficult question there, but I really think that you're going to be able to kind of answer that in a good way. You've taught me a lot, not only just talking on the phone, but also at One Shepherd, man. Like, you are a very competent warrior and a very good leader. So, guys out there who are wanting to put themselves into a position of becoming a better warrior or start learning how to be a warrior, what would you tell guys out there?
Well, you got to start somewhere, right? So just get started.
Yeah.
You'll get better. You'll figure out if something's real or false. You'll sort through it. You'll find the truth. It may take a while to get there, but you'll eventually get there. You'll get there physically. You'll get there emotionally. You'll get there spiritually. You'll build those networks and you'll build those connections. The worst thing you could do is stay on the fence or be on the fence. You need to get in motion. You got to stay in motion.
I like that. You know, an object that freaking is in motion stays in motion. An object that's stagnant stays stagnant. So I guess what that message kind of wraps up to is that don't freaking sit on your ass and stay stagnant, whether that's, intellectually or physically as well. Keep learning, keep doing, keep growing.
Yeah, for sure.
Wise words, man. Wise words. Dude, I really appreciate you coming on, man. I have definitely enjoyed this conversation immensely. I don't always say that after a podcast. There's been a few of them where I'm like, okay, but I feel like we could keep going another hour if we had the time, man, and just keep hitting it. But thank you so much for coming on, dude. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man, it was really great talking with you, Will, and it was great meeting you, man. What's the old adage? Life shrinks and expands in direct proportion to your willingness to take risk. So, man, thank you for taking the risk, coming out and training with me, and getting to meet you. I mean, I really appreciate you getting in motion and staying in motion.
Hell yeah, man! And I'll tell you, for the guys out there, this isn't a commercial for freaking One Shepherd, but you got to get out there and check it out, guys. Take that risk and go out there. Now, Mike, you have a YouTube channel as well, and that's Small Team Supply. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So, when I got started into selling some gun parts because One Shepherd, I found a need for some pretty cool products. I was able to meet Brent 0331. He got a channel. Check it out. He got some really great light infantry content on there as well. And, I got to talking with him and showed him some of the stuff I was working on. And he actually ended up buying an upper from me. And that kind of put me on this long chain of events to where, I'm going to be bringing to market some of the stuff that I found valuable from my experiences out of One Shepherd and things that I found valuable just in my martial background in general. And I want to highlight those things and, really deliver a high value to the guys that are wanting to improve themselves and study the martial crafts.
I was looking on your channel, man. You've got some good content, and we were talking, offline here, saying, I think it was last time we talked, that you're really going to be throwing a lot more content out there as time progresses. So, for all you guys
absolutely.
out there,
that's the plan for sure. Is as long as I stay in motion, right, and that's my goal. Well, expect to have some more stuff coming down the pipe.
By the way, guys, next time Mike and I get the opportunity to meet up, hopefully this fall, although we'll see. If not, then, next spring or whenever, we'll definitely be pushing out some solid, hand-to-hand combatives stuff on YouTube and probably even some extra stuff, on weapons training and whatever. So I'm looking forward to that, man.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure, dude. It was really fun playing with you, after the steak and beers, right? We had to get into some grappling action, and it was great comparing notes with you, Will.
Yeah. That was a lot of fun, man. We actually ended up kind of rolling around for 3 hours afterwards, and guys were like, "What the fuck are you guys doing?"
After we were already smoked from an entire FTX, a grueling FTX. We had enough fire in us still that we wanted to grapple afterwards.
Bro, guys like you and me, we could be totally smoked and still want to grapple for 3 hours. We're just crazy.
Yeah. Well, it's what we love, right?
Yeah,
so
yeah. All right, man. Well, I'm gonna let you go here. I know it's late on your end, so I'll sign off here. But guys, until next time, please remember that you are your first and last line of defense. Stay safe out there. Don't take any risks that you don't have to. And again, Mike, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.